So when you know it, every time I mention something on Newswave like this, one of the companies just wants to mess with me, whether it's Nintendo with a direct announcement or Microsoft dropping a ton of Series X information to now Sony saying that the PS5 is going to be having its event tomorrow. Like, we're getting just over 24 hours of notice for what seems to be the big blowout event for what the PlayStation 5 is going to be, what it hopes to accomplish, and Mark Cerny is going to be the one at the forefront kind of explaining this to us. Now, will he do a good job? Well, Mark Cerny does like to talk about things kind of as people will watch and eyes glaze over and all of this stuff. But we can kind of look back to February of 2013 to get an idea as to what this event could look like. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, and I want to talk to you about what you can expect. Now, if you want to make sure you see this, if you're subscribed down below with the little bell on, I will be live streaming this event tomorrow, and you can come by and we'll try to make sense of everything that Mark Cerny is saying, or at least most of the stuff that he is saying. He gets pretty technical at times, and then he tries to rope it back in, bring it back in and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. But this was the tweet that PlayStation put out early this morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Basically, once Newswave went up, boom, a few minutes later, they announced this, just to mess with me. They were just waiting. They were like, all right, Newswave is up. Yep, send that tweet. But this is what they said. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time, PS5 lead system architect Mark Cerny will provide a deep dive into PS5 system architecture and how it will shape the future of games. Watch tomorrow at PlayStation Blog. And as you can imagine, the hype is real online right now. People have been waiting for anything about the PlayStation 5 because it's been pretty lopsided. We've been doing nothing but talking about the Series X because that's like all that's been in the news. Microsoft has been all over the place with the Series X at this point, and Sony's been pretty quiet, minus a couple of Wired articles where we don't really get any kind of visual or anything. We hear about some of this stuff, right? And we saw at that investors meeting where they showed the Spider-Man demo kind of off camera, where we saw how fast it could load, which was pretty exciting. Load times are annoying, so I'm glad that load times getting eliminated and frame rates being 60 minimum, I think would make gaming much, much better. So I'm happy to hear more about that. Now, of course, people are really excited going into this because they probably think we're going to see everything about the PlayStation 5, and I'm here to kind of explain to you what you can expect after getting a refresher on that 2013 event. Now, we are, of course, in, I'll say, uncharted territory right now, right? No pun intended there, but we are, because there's no E3 this year, right? Like, it's being canceled. Sony was not going to go anyway, so that probably doesn't affect their plans too much, but for going into the next generation systems, it obviously affects Microsoft quite a bit because they were planning a big blowout of games around that time, but they're going to hold their own digital event. But when we had the PlayStation 4, remember, we had E3, and that's when Sony just obliterated Microsoft. Microsoft tied their shoes together out of the gate, fell over, and then Sony came over and started kicking them when they were down. It was pretty ugly. If you go back and watch that, yeah, it wasn't great at all. So they did leave quite a bit of stuff out so that they could talk about it at E3. That means that they potentially could tell us more tomorrow than what they told us in 2013, but there are still a lot of questions that I would like answered overall for the PlayStation 5 because people seem really excited. There are a lot of developers on Twitter right now, and I also saw like Jason Schreier and some others talking about how people are super impressed with the hardware for the PS5 specifically. So I'm wondering what exactly Mark Cerny has come up with. He's a very smart guy. So if someone's going to come up with something crazy for a system, it's him. And that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to see this thing. Now, what did they do in 2013? Because that can give us, of course, an idea as to how they may approach this thing. And of course, we just saw what Microsoft did with the Series X, and I think that'll also give us an idea as to what Sony could do here as well. I think Sony does want to hold off a lot of their big game reveals for, like, probably, I would say, around E3 time, maybe a little before, maybe a little after. Like, they could still do something in June, right? Because at this point, it's scattered. Everyone's just going to do live streams anyway. But let's see, 2013, we had the PS4 revealed by the system architect at the time, of course, Mark Cerny, and he came out, and one of the things that he showed us almost immediately, because he was going to have to use it, was the PlayStation 4 controller, and I expect him to pretty much show us the PS5 controller, because I think the PlayStation 5 will be off camera like it was at the last event, or maybe he'll use a PC, I don't know, but I don't think we'll see the system like as its form factor. I do think we'll see the controller because I think Mark Cerny will use it on stage. I mean, if you remember, they've already told us a lot of the stuff that we can expect from it in those Wired articles. The only thing that they really haven't explained too much is what we believe to be a digital assistant, like an AI assistant, and that's why there's that microphone seemingly on the controller. But we've heard some wild stuff with this thing. We've heard heart rate monitors. We've heard that it can read how much you're sweating and stuff. So I want to see if those patents remain in this controller, but that's one piece of hardware I expect to see tomorrow. Definitely whatever Mark Cerny's going to use on stage should be the PS5 controller. He'll hold it up and we'll get a good clean shot of it. And they may even release some press details after that with everything we need to know about the PS5 controller. Now, during that event, they also showed an Unreal Engine 4 tech demo, the benchmark demo, just to show that they did have full Unreal Engine 4 compatibility with the PlayStation 4. That was a big deal at the time because they also went on to reveal the x86 architecture, which was a massive departure from what they had been doing up until that point, which were custom chips. Remember, we had the Emotion Engine chip, we had the Cell processor, and then they basically said, you know what, we're just going to go pretty much industry standard at this point. We're going to go x86. It's so much easier to develop for, so that's what we're going to do. They talked about how they were going to do GDDR5. I think they also talked about 8 gigabytes of memory as well, but they definitely talked about the speed of the memory at the time, which was a pretty big deal for Sony to be able to make all of that work in a $400 system. That is something they did not reveal there, though, was the pricing. That and the form factor both waited until E3. Something I think they'll do similarly here. That waits until an event closer to the actual release, and they'll probably tell us the date then as well. That really comes back to what this event is for. Keep in mind when this event is happening was right around when the canceled GDC was going to take place, and that's pretty much who this event is for. It's for game developers. They want to show all this off, and then after that, they were going to be at GDC and talk to developers about what they have seen here now at this event and any plans they have about developing software for this PlayStation 5 going forward. So it's going to seem maybe a little strange for some of us, okay, when you're watching it, because it's not going to be them just showing trailer after trailer of games. Now, this is the part that's kind of an unknown right now. In 2013, they did show more games than I think people remember. Okay, so I think people are looking at this and saying they're not going to show any real games. Now, if you go back and look, they showed Knack, which was like game of the year at the time, you know, Knack. They showed Killzone Shadowfall, which looked pretty good then when it came out. And then Drive Club, which, of course, if you want to show a game that looks amazing half the time on these new platforms, show a racing game. Like, they almost always look really, really good. And, of course, they could even show the next Gran Turismo kind of as a tech demo and show the higher frame rate counter at the top. Like, oh, this thing's 120 frames or something at 4K. Here's how we have achieved that. Like, that's something they could do here. But I'm trying to figure out if they are going to show any games for the next generation platform, the PS5, or they will take advantage of its backwards compatibility and just show PS4 games running better. I think we will see that Spider-Man demo. That is something we'll probably see in full, you know, like directly feeded to us. We won't see it off screen. And they'll show how fast it can load, how Spider-Man can move from one end of the map to the other in literally a second because it can load all the assets in, just to show off what everyone is really thinking is like the PlayStation 5's big like ace up its sleeve, which is the faster SSD that's going to come equipped. Now, since this is for game developers specifically, I think the other part that is going to be a big deal here is going to be VR. And I know there's a lot of people who don't want to hear about that necessarily, but Sony is the market leader, and if the PlayStation 5 has something built into the system that helps with virtual reality when you're running with maybe the next PlayStation VR 2 headset, which I also don't think will be shown here either, but if the PlayStation 5 has something built into the system, whether it's like a separate chip that helps out with VR so we don't need that, you know, that booster box thing next to it, that will probably be talked about and maybe even showcased somewhat with like the first generation headset. But yeah, I think there probably will be something VR related here, as I believe the PlayStation 5 will lean into that more so than the PS4 did, because keep in mind that VR headset came in like midway through the PS4 life, and they kind of had to just do a quick Band-Aid solution with that booster box. My biggest hope for tomorrow is that Mark Cerny comes out on stage, talks about some of the basics, and then goes immediately into the backwards compatibility of this system. There have been so many rumors about the PlayStation 5 being fully backwards compatible that I really hope that one of the big things that Sony and Mark Cerny had figured out was how to make all of these games work on the PlayStation 5. This would be another place that he would talk about it and probably explain, for the most part, how they made it work. Specifically, if they got PS3 games to function on the PS5. Maybe they talk about how the new CPU and maybe some new algorithms and all the stuff that they figured out made it work. If that's the case, I hope they show it off here with a PS1 game, then a PS2 game, a PS3, and a PS4. That would be one of those moments where people would get really, really excited. Like, if they had a live audience, that's when I think you'd get a lot of applause from the crowd, which I guess there won't be a live audience tomorrow. It'll just be Mark Cerny kind of talking about it, maybe in just like an office somewhere. But yes, I'm very excited to hear about the PlayStation 5. I hope it's different enough from the Series X. Like, there have been rumors that it's going to be weaker than the Series X, and okay, that's fine. At this point, I think as long as the systems are within reason of each other, I mean, come on, are we really going to notice one system is like 4K at 60 and one system's like 4K at 70 or 80 frames because if they're both locked to 60, or if it's like one can do 8K better than the other, it's like, oh, okay. I mean, as long as they can pull off 4K, we're just going to look towards the games or the secondary features like Quick Resume from Microsoft or anything Sony can maybe pull off with VR at this point. So I hope there's something there that makes it different from the Series X overall. But I'm excited. Let me know if you guys are down below. Make sure you like the video on the way out if you enjoyed it. Dislike it if not. Guys, I will be live tomorrow leading into this event. We'll go live half hour ahead of time, which will be 11:30 a.m. Eastern my time. So look for it 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. And we'll finally see what we can expect from the PlayStation 5. And then we can step back and maybe do a much better comparison between the Series X and the PS5 later on tomorrow. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.